want to make sure everyone gets it right because we want to make sure emails go to the right place. So it's always, if you ever have criticisms, just email bigrabshow@gmail.com.
That's where they go. That's it.
There you go.
Dan, this is fun for me because I'm coming off of a week of just listening to your voice nonstop whenever I'm doing dishes and stuff like that.
My horrendous nasal voice.
Yeah, well, honestly, after listening through Piobaireachd is for Everyone, like listening to you narrate it, I do feel like I can honestly give a real plug, even for anybody who already has the physical book. If for no other reason than because listening to your reading of it, we get to hear your voice work. Anytime there's like a stuffy museum curator or like old military instructor or anything like that, you do their voice, and it's pretty fun.
Man, I haven't
all
listened.
suffered during the pandemic. Sorry.
Yeah, it's worthwhile.
Better than my audiobook then, Jim.
That's
You put mine on
here I am
double speed and just tried to get through it in one afternoon. You listened to Dan all week.
I slowed Dan's down because I was enjoying it so much.
Did you know there's an interesting thing? Because until the pandemic, I'd never really listened to an audiobook at all. I found a bunch of, I'll be honest, Warhammer 40,000 stuff. Like I do love a bit of sci-fi, right? And it is particularly bonkers sci-fi. And I was listening to a bunch of this stuff just on YouTube, and I was like blown away by how good it was, like how much of a performance in there. So whenever I came to do my own audiobook, which to be honest, I never really thought about doing until I heard that Bruce was putting one out for his book. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a total thing you can do. Why would you not be able to do that for this? So, yeah, but when it came to things like I do a voice for Angus Mackay and things like that, and to be honest, the whole project runs off the back of, like, why does Piobaireachd have to be painful? Why is the whole thing, like a labour of love is one thing, but pure attrition is bogus. I think actually totally bogus. And when you look at the people that I speak about in the book, so the book is a social and cultural history rather than like a pure study of musicology. Because I felt like a study of musicology, like if you look into what Andrew Wright or Jimmy McIntosh wrote, there's fantastic studies in it. I mean, I don't think they'll ever get the academic appreciation that they probably deserve, but that's a whole other gripe, if I'm perfectly honest with you. But yeah, it was like, why can't this be enjoyable? That there are things in this music that are enjoyable, you know? The duration is probably not that enjoyable for most people. Seeing as, like, most people, you'll, like, sit and watch TV with your spouse while you look at your phone, so you'll have, like, two things attracting your attention. So asking someone to sit for 15 minutes and listen to one performer play one piece without doing anything else can be a little bit of a learning curve, I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
tell me if you think this is oh, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just gonna say I guess I wasn't gonna say anything. Jim, go ahead.
I'm just curious if Dan, if to you it's any kind of I don't know, heresy of any kind that for me, like I'm very much a Piobaireachd outsider. You know, like I'm trying to get into it, you know, but like this is very much I'm dipping the toe here. And for me, like the most enjoyable performance for me that I've gone back to several times was one that Murray Henderson did with string accompaniment. Right,
Like,
so he had a string quartet, yeah, and that for me, like I tried to listen to Piobaireachd before that solo, and I couldn't get the vision. And when I brought in more elements like that, then I could go like, oh, okay, yeah, I dig this. So is my palate not refined enough yet, or you know, is that a good gateway to get to pure Piobaireachd? You know what I mean?
I think that is an excellent gateway, and the unsung hero of that performance, that arrangement, is a guy called James Fairley, who is the bass player. Right, he plays the upright bass.
Oh, really?
And he worked with John and Callum and Murray to arrange the string parts. James Lindsay, sorry, not James Fairley. James Lindsay, who was a year below me at the University of Strathclyde's BA in Applied Music, and James is recognisable to any trad fans. He plays in Brayback. He plays for everybody, right? That's how the trad scene works. But he's an incredible musician all round. But what he managed to do, and I've never spoken to him about this, and I should probably ask him. Well, it's quite a while ago now. Is he managed to pull out the music, the things that I think expert master Piobaireachd players like Murray Henderson acknowledge. So he's used the accompaniment to pull out, like, in Lord Love Us Lament, it's an even meter tune, it's a 4/4 tune, so that strong, medium, strong sound. If you were to sing those phrases, cheery, any, eh, oh, cheery, any, dilly, eerie, you'd naturally be louder and quieter. The bagpipe doesn't do that. You're a two-dimensional instrument. But strings do that. And by using the various voices along the various voices in the arrangement, you can pull out that sort of stuff. And I think it's a wonderful gateway drug, really. But you're right in what you say. You've got to dip your toe in. That is the thing. Like, what I often say to pipers who ask me about playing Piobaireachd is, it is as much for you as it is for anyone else. If you've ever picked up the instrument, well, it's absolutely it's music designed for this instrument. We're not imitating anything else on it. This is bagpipe music, real bagpipe music, or the bagpipe. It's not songs or other instruments, music tradition. It's our music tradition, and that works two ways, right? It can be shared, it can be taken away. I find myself now working reasonably seriously on a second book, and going like why are these things why are things the way they are? Why do we do things the way we do them?
So how do we do that?
Existential crisis book.
So Dan, like, walk us through some of the, like, a lot of our listeners are not familiar with Piobaireachd at all, so they're just sort of thinking about, kind of wondering what it is. So walk us through what we do currently, and then let us know some of the things that you're wondering about, because I think that's really interesting.
I guess, what is Piobaireachd, right? Theme and variation music. Now, theme and variation music's an incredibly old concept. You can trace the very roots of music from the first time that human beings managed to find an area where a food source naturally grew, or huntable animals would make their home. By the time that we invented free time, and someone stood up and was like, "What's the deal with buffaloes?" We tried to find entertainment, and a lot of kind of call and response music would have been developed. And those are ideas that comes through. Like, if you think of pop music choruses, for example, how many pieces can you think of off the top of your head where there'll be a phrase at the end of the verse that becomes the phrase of the chorus? That's a call and response, a variated idea. And that's all that Piobaireachd really is. Theme and variation. The original themes, the grounds, the urlars, that's all urlar means, by the way, is to anybody at home wondering what I've just said. I've not just tripped over my tongue. It's Gaelic for ground or floor. So it's the ground floor of the tune, right, is your urlar. Those melodies, there's a lot of different ones. We probably have in our, I think Andrew will agree with me when I say competitive canon of Piobaireachd, maybe 300 tunes, right? So that's a lot of music when you think about it. It's the light music outstrips that by tens of thousands, right? An incredible amount of light music. But when it comes to Piobaireachd, we're talking about 300 pieces collected by the Piobaireachd Society, which is its own thing. Worth a Google, the Piobaireachd Society, very interesting, and the Kilberry Book of Culmore. So between those two sources, you'll get all the Piobaireachd you could ever play in your lifetime. But then you come back to, right, well, we've got theme and variation, we know where to get it from. What else is included? Well, those variations become sections. So we have our urlar, our opening section, our ground floor, where the theme ideas will pop up. I'd just like to throw something in here as well. The word that pipers use a lot to describe melody note inside of a melody is themal. Right? Themal is not a word. It's theme or melody. It does my goat. what do you call it? When pipers do all sorts of bagpipey words. For example, MacLeod's controversy. Doesn't you don't pronounce it like that? Aluminium. There's another. Sorry, I'll just move on from that.
I was going to say that feels almost like a which side of the pond are you from kind of pronunciation choice.
Oh no, it just sounds good. MacLeod's controversy sounds a lot better than controversy. Yeah, whatever. It's Marquis of Argyll, Marquis. Right. Anyway, right. That's near here nor there. That's just a little gripe. So the variations, the next sections are standardised. So, I mean, I've got my practice channel here. This is probably the easiest way of getting the idea across, right? So, if we're talking about our G-ish variations, right? So you get the G-ish and the shul. G-ish variations are like heartbeats. Okay, I'm sure that'll do wonders for the for the sound levels on this. So, something like. That would be like the first line of a G-ish variation. And then you've got the shul. Now, the big idea of the shul is to reverse it. So instead of having long note, short note, you have short note, long note. Hando, hando. So you'd have like... Try to remember one now. Some along those lines, right? I'm kind of pulling that out of my ear there, but the reversal of it. And what's interesting is, I'm sure Andrew will agree with me, that the magic, the blasts of Piobaireachd is often found beyond the sheet music. So the egogic stress of it all. You know, like when I played that G-ish, it's the first line of the G-ish in the unjust incarceration. And I'm trying to put a bit of weight on the third pulse of every bar. There's 3 pulses in the bar, third pulse of the bar, and put a little weight on it. Or I'm attempting to anyway. And it just highlights the melody a little bit. It's what Willie McCallum calls an awareness. If you're aware of that note in the phrase, then it tends to be enough for the audience to be aware of it. I think it kind of leads me into something. Well, I'll come back to it, right? I'll explain it next bit. So you've got your first variations there, your G-ish and your shul. Then you get into your, what I would call the lemlua family. Okay, so a lemlua is a grip. Lem meaning leap or jump, and lua being a generic word for movement, right? So the jumping movement. So you and Cameron the Block Heels salute, right? One of the silver medal tunes this year. So that's a lemlua variation. We would do a doubling of it, where those little cadences, we get rid of those. Then all we're doing there is in our Turla variation, same idea. We're replacing the lemlua with a torlua. Then the doubling again, we remove the cadence until we get to Crunla variation. So I should have said a Turla is a twirling or twisting movement. Then a Crunlua is the crown, the crowning movement, the big finish. Then you do your doubling of that, where you take out the cadences. And that's your sort of generic Piobaireachd, I'd say, that there are variations on the Crunla movement. There's a Breabach variations, the back of the hill, the Fiscalcia, the open Crunlua, and you've got your Crunlua Amach. And Crunlua Amach is Crunlua to exit. If you ever find yourself in the Western Isles, you'll see lots of signs that say Amach, and that's what it means, exit.
Does that, Dan, is this like an overly ignorant thing for me to say? Like, let me know if it is, but I'm just, again, as like the piper who like wants to get into Piobaireachd but hasn't yet, where you're describing like the ground movement, and like so many of these terms are things that I've heard, right? Like you hear these things as an unaware piper, right? Like I hear people talk about these things and I kind of go like, I should know about that, but I don't, But as you describe like the ground and then this thing that builds on it and this thing that builds on it and it gets eventually to a crown, I can't help thinking to myself of Pachelbel's Canon, which I think is a song that a lot of people are aware of, right? It's like, it opens with just like, do, 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 do. And really, that's the whole thing. Everything for the whole rest of the time you're listening to that tune is that, with additional things building on top of it until it gets so big that it finishes. Is that kind of the feel?
Very much, yeah. And I think well, one thing I say to you is this, right? You're a normal piper, Jim, right? And
I'd like to think so.
We're freaks. We're not normal, right? We're bizarre creatures that, like, for whatever reason, have been like soul bound to these damn things, and we love it, and we want everybody else to love it too, right? That's the nature of being a piping professional. Be a professional at it. So see that, like, you're not ignorant in having those thoughts. Is you're in fact very bold, because the vast majority of pipers that you've probably met across your career of playing pipes know hee-haw, nothing about Piobaireachd at all. And that's no detriment to them. That is the nature of it. See, until the 1920s, most pipers, and the few that there were, knew nothing about Piobaireachd. There was a select handful. It's funny, I'm on the Competing Pipers Association board, the committee, and which doesn't really mean much, right? But we often get in all this data about who's going round the games, and Aachen Shugal Highland Games, only 7 folk played in the Piobaireachd. Well, see, in 1912, 5 folk played in the Piobaireachd. There weren't that many out playing. There never has been. There's more now than there ever has been. Okay, that's globally. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. Somebody will give you some sort of bit of Piobaireachd that they've picked up from somewhere. It's good days for Piobaireachd, frankly. Anyway, so the thing in there is, yes, there is a relationship there. What is that relationship? Good noises are good noises is the first thing. If we're talking about composers who were living in the Western Isles 500 years ago, they've got not a lot of day-to-day difference with composers who were living in Central Europe 500 years ago. Now, the big difference is resource. There's more people. So if you look at like the works of Johann Sebastian Bach, who, interestingly, the guy that killed Haydn was also the guy that killed Bach. That's not a joke. There's no punchline there. That's the same guy. He's a surgeon. He's a terrible surgeon. Did eye surgery on both of them. Killed them, stone deed. But there's also a conspiracy theory that guy owed a lot of money to somebody that Bach owed a lot of money to. There you go. Right, there's a lovely sort of idea for, I don't know, a kind of loop on.
Yeah, I've got something to Google later. My goodness.
It's very useful. Anyway, but the thing about it is, these musical ideas are very, very natural. Start off low, finish complicated, right? Wee thing up to a big thing, right? The snowball effect, if you want, the avalanche. If you look at like the Bach's fugues, for example, they all kind of go that way. You can go across the entirety of human art and find that. I think it was in, like, if we kind of match up with, of course, all art goes in fashions, right? So there are Piobaireachds that I think, like the McCrimmon tunes, which are probably the cornerstone of Piobaireachd performance. I've never met a piper who played Piobaireachd regularly who was like brought up on, say, just Ian Dal Mackay tunes and 20th century tunes. We all will know the Groat, the King's Taxes, McCrimmon's Sweetheart. Like, we'll have some sort of knowledge of them, even if we don't necessarily have them catalogued in our head. But we'll have an idea of that is the structure that, I'm going to say Patrick Moore McCrimmon would have laid down. in the 17th century. It was very likely when that all came together. And it's not as if these guys were listening to lots and lots of recorded music or going to concert halls, but those base ideas of start small, get bigger, that's part of being human. The difference was that, taking Haydn as an example, as a composer of string quartets, he found a niche that was useful. So he could take a string quartet, 4 voices, low to high, and create pieces that would be suitable for somebody to play in the big dining room of the Prince of Vienna's palace for a small group of guests. Whereas for pipers, we would be you'd maybe have 1 or 2 in the local area. Like the McCrimmons of Skye being a very important group because they actively taught. So they would have a handful of kids learning how to play, up to maybe kind of, let's call them mid-teenagers. The most famous of these guys are probably like Charles MacArthur, who was there for 12 years. Most folk got out of Dodge after 7. But they would be able to go, right, we have a master player who will come to Castle Dunvegan and play for the Mackays of Gairloch have come to visit. So this home entertainment system will put on a show for us. And I think that the big kind of mistake that the man in the street makes is to think that Piobaireachd and Piobaireachd playing was and is separate from the musicianship of the rest of the instrument. Truth time, I listen to the podcast. I listen every week. I hear all the horrible things that you say, and I've catalogued them, and I will now retort to every single one of them. And I really enjoyed the one that came out yesterday, the kind of birth of the dojo, and there's a line being talked about recently about the technical ability. And once you have a certain level of technical ability, you can play whatever you choose to play. What I think is interesting is this is especially in Scotland, right? Because what I feel like is what happens here is, well, maybe not. Maybe it's quicker than this, but it used to be whatever happened in Scotland 10 years later would be getting replicated in the furthest points of the world, right? Eventually, someone would go on holiday somewhere and explain something to someone. Whether that was taken on, 100% verbatim or not, well, that's human nature. But in the way that we're taught, and I'm very keenly aware of this just now, I teach a school programme. And I'm like, look, to get into my band, you need to play 11 tunes. But my job is not to get you to play 11 tunes. My job is to get you to play any tune you want to play. But to play in this ensemble and to meet the needs of the ensemble as a performance opportunity, you have to play that. But what I always say is, once you've got those 11 tunes, then we're going to start playing your tunes. And what I'll generally do at that point is say, oh, well, we've got to make sure that your performance fundamentals are right. Making sure the bagpipe remains steady. Because if the bagpipe's not steady, well, it's pointless. Because it won't sound good. As my dear dad likes to say, a beautiful painting on a lumpy canvas is just a lumpy painting. So you make whatever music you want, but if the pipe's not right, it doesn't matter. And they'll say, well, we'll need to get you something so you can start to learn to listen to the pipes. Well, why don't you try playing this? Here's the first line of Glengarry's Lament. I never use the word Piobaireachd with them. Not until they're already playing it, right? Which I know sounds underhanded, but I'd often think that the zeitgeist draws a big hard line between the two. And I'll tell you whose fault it is. Seamus McNeil's. Right? We owe Seamus a huge debt, right? We do owe Seamus a huge debt. Seamus, Tommy Pearson, and
Go on, Dan.
If we're talking about the Mount Rushmore of piping pedagogues, right? Well, there's 3 of them right there, right? Seamus McNeil, John McClellan, Ian McFadden, and Tommy Pearson. Absolutely, those 4 guys. Put them on top of that Mount Rushmore. There you go, right? But I think it'd be hard to. But Seamus, how much can you swear on your podcast? I don't think I've ever heard either of you use an expletive. Seamus talked a big game a lot.
Oh,
and that was just the style at the time.
No swear words. Well done.
Belt. Yeah, tried my best. You actually turned your camera off just to hide yourself. Anyway, so Seamus talked a big game. And he wasn't wrong all the time. But he would put things across in a very combative way, in a very, what would you even call it? He liked to draw lines, and say this is good and this isn't good. Famously, Gordon Duncan in the knockout contest. If this is the way bagpipes are going, then I'm going to take up the fiddle. Great line.
Yeah.
Very clever.
Very.
But what does that say? That tribalizes the whole thing. It's us and them. No. It's just us, right? It's everyone's. As long as you pick up the pipe and put it on your shoulder, it doesn't matter if you're playing Lament for Donald Dougal Mackay or you're playing Amazing Grace. You are a piper, and you are one of us. We are together. It is we, not them and us. And I think, having my experience of Piobaireachd growing up, the man that taught me when I started off had a Cowell Gold Medal for Piobaireachd. Okay, it was for the 1930s, but he still had it. And he would get taught by Peter MacLeod Senior. But to me, I grew up in the pipe bands, and it was such an alien concept. It was just such a useless thing. And when I think of the opportunities that I've had to learn from great players, and how off-putting it has been at times, and how attritional it has been at times, I'm very, very careful as a tutor to make sure that the first Piobaireachd that you play is going to take quite a while, because you're going to feel like it's just like nothing you've ever done before. Because the lines don't go a squeedly deedly, a squidly doodly dum, a squeedly deedly diddly deedly doodly diddly dum. And they don't always make sense that way. They do make a sense though. But once I think you've got the tools for how to absorb, how to interpret the music that's put in front of you, which is not linear. That's the mistake I think a lot of people make, is they think it goes, right, there's line one, and you play he and tro, he or, and repeat that. And then you go, tro, idre, so, if I can remember, he, idre, ro, dri, o, tro, he, o, and, right, that's you learn the first line. And you go, wait a minute, right, hang on, what did you just sing at me? Because you must be sitting in the middle of that, Jim, going, what Caledonian nonsense was that?
Right. It's pretty nonsense, but
thank you. That's my specialty. But there lies the point. When you say to somebody, look, that was a Tullochard, right? The Mackenzie's March. I think it's either March or Gathering. Doesn't matter. You just call it Tullochard, and then the adjudicator can figure out which one you're playing. And it's got 4 pulses in the bar, and you end each 2-bar phrase with a cadence. Suddenly you start to go, right, well, I'm going, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and a 3, 4. And then you go, right, okay, now that sounds a lot more like what I've been taught to play in light music. Whereas very often, and God bless them, but the way that folk taught Piobaireachd, probably up to in this century, has always been, you get it and you don't, son. He's not got the blasts in him. Like, his piece. What a lot of nonsense. Yeah. There you go. Right, it's
pretty. It's pretty interesting.
It makes a lot of sense.
I'm going to just say, I'm not. I think you must have been joking when you said you're going to refute everything we've said in the podcast so far, because it sounds like we're on a very similar page here.
No, Andrew, I'm well known for absolutely being totally on the level, humourless, absolutely as die as the grave. All the time.
I was just making sure, because I like the sounds of a lot of that. I think that the Seamus McNeill, I think that the Seamus McNeill thing is really quite interesting. And he was also one of the pioneers sort of bringing bagpipe instruction to North America as well, if I'm not mistaken, right? He would have been... Absolutely,
yeah.
And I sometimes wonder if our general, paralysis, insistence that things are the way that we were saying, that's not really totally positive. You either have it or you don't. And Piobaireachd must be played exactly this way, or you're just not getting it. And we sort of have that, and I think it's getting better in the last decade or two, but we had that attitude where it's like this very closed off thing that where, unless you have the pedigree, you don't really belong and all that sort of thing. That's probably where that originates from in our society as well, which should be, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, as red-blooded Americans, we should be, interested in expression and not necessarily adapting Pibroch, but, playing it with our own unique voice and style. Like, that should be something that's on the radar, and it's really not. And I've sometimes wondered why it is that way, because interestingly, you will see folks putting their own spin on things in Scotland quite a bit more than you'll see it here.
I think that is true. The pedigree thing's interesting. So Seamus as a character, right? I mean, bearing in mind he died in 95. Mm-hmm. And yet, so the thing with the North American tuition, by the way, was really casual. The thing about the College of Piping was it was the first inherently piping organisation to have an address. So folk would write letters to the College of Piping, like 16 Otago Street, Glasgow. Dear Mr. McNeil, I have read your periodical. Would you like to come to Nova Scotia and help sort my wee band out? Aye, sure, son. Dear so and so. Aye, you buy the tickets. I'll meet you at the bar at Glasgow Airport. And that's how it run. Donald MacLeod, and this is a really interesting thing. Right? I get lessons off Willie McCallum, and lots of guys in the US and Canada get lessons off Willie. Willie's a phenomenal tutor, by the way. If any of these at a workshop Willie's teaching at, I'd highly encourage you to take the time to even talk to him for 10 minutes. The man is an incredible human being.
Willie will be on the dojo in May, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go.
Just for a wee thing, if you'd like to get a flavoring.
But, absolutely, I encourage anyone listening to take the time to go and hear what Willie's got to say.
Yeah.
But the thing is, see the tour that Willie does, that tour was started in the 1960s with like Seamus and Donald MacLeod and Ian McPadgen.
Yeah.
And then John McDougall later on came in, whoever was available. John McDougall was the headmaster of a primary school, like a junior school. What would you call that? Whatever, right? Not a high school.
Elementary school, maybe.
There you go. My dear Watson, that is correct.
Or as they say in upstate New York, elementary school.
Elementary school.
Yeah, elementary school. Yeah, it sort of like points to the quality of schooling in upstate New York.
I think it is upstate. It sounds like it should be quite good. But there you go. Anyway, so John had the summer off. So John would go out for 3 weeks at a time, and then come back for a couple of weeks, then go out for 3 weeks at a time, and be back for Oban and Inverness when the schools went back. So he was like the perfect candidate to go and do it. But it's funny that kind of route has evolved over the years, but the ideas are still there. Anyway, so I do think there's some roots in that. This is the way it was taught to me, is often the worst excuse that a piping tutor can give. Because it sounds like, I haven't thought about this at all, I don't really understand what it means, but this is the way it was given to me, so therefore it must be right. And folk often point fingers at John MacDonald of Inverness for being that way, but let's bear in mind, the man was born in 1874. Like, the culture was, do as I say, not what I do. But old Johnny is on record multiple times for appreciating other ways of performing the tunes.
Yeah, that's the impression I have of it.
Sorry.
I was just saying, that's the impression I have of John MacDonald of Inverness, is just that he actually was quite open-minded, and he's well known to have played tunes different ways throughout his lifetime as well.
Totally, yeah. And the sad thing is, we don't have access. Like, there's some very, very short recordings of him. We're lucky in the Piping Centre to have access to some of this stuff. There's things you'll find online. There's actually a wealth of it on YouTube. But the thing there is, like, when we talk about the differences in performance choices, the choice bit is the word that's really important here. If you rock up to, I don't know, Grandfather Mountain, right, to play in the Open Piobaireachd there, right, and you say, I'm going to play you Struan Robertson's Salute, Glengarry's Lament, or I don't know, what was it? McCrimmon's Sweetheart. Okay, can you give us McCrimmon's Sweetheart? I'm playing at the John McDonald setting. Okay, right, there's a couple of minor changes there, that's fine. See whatever you're putting in there. You're looking for an accurate, consistent delivery of musical ideas. If you want to come off the boards and say, oh, they didn't give me a prize because they don't like the setting that I'm playing, but you've played it like a mad person would play music, then of course you're not getting anything, because you've not stuck to the base ideas of music. Are you playing the ideas consistently? Is there clarity? Are you in control of the tempo? Are you using tempo as a decorative device? There's a thing in Piobaireachd we don't talk about enough. Tempo is a tool, it's not an absolute. In light music, we can say, alright, keep your 2/4 marches between 63 and 68 BPM, depending on the melodic structure. And you can do that. But it's all feel in Piobaireachd. You know, and some phrases will make you think, oh, this has to be a certain way, but they're not. And when you realise, oh, there is a rhythmic continuity inside these sometimes very oblique ideas, you go, that's where they're tied together. Not necessarily in this note to that note with this decorative device, but in this rhythmic idea to that rhythmic idea to the other rhythmic idea. And you go, it's more than just a linear melody. It's how you contrast with the drone. It's how you are able to create tension and release. So yeah, that's what I'd say. I think having played a couple of non-standard settings and won some prizes with them and then not won some prizes with them, the thing that I can say is the kind of dividing line between them is, when I have played the tunes well, I have been rewarded. When I have not played the tunes well, I have been ignored. So what's the common denominator here? Playing the tunes well. And that's a whole discussion in itself about, right, well, what are the base tenets of playing music well? Clarity, consistency, control, the right note in the right place for the right amount of time, as dictated to you by the score or the setting or the arrangement that you are being led through, you're being coached in.
I think
we've all had problems, we know we've not met that mark.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big challenges of having a culture that operates a lot in the competitive, area. It's way easy. It's like so easy to accidentally invert the necessary stoic mindset, where really we're all just focused on the things we can control, and trying to do that the best that we can do on the day. And by the way, that's what's going to lead to someone who's successful, over a large period of time in the competitive system. But it really does sort of degenerate into just complaining about what the judges said, doesn't it? And I think that's a huge problem for Piobaireachd. I mean, I don't know. I doubt very many people could name great Piobaireachd players that were not competitors. There are some of them. There's quite a few of them actually that sort of have done really interesting things outside of the competitive area. But pop culture Piobaireachd, for lack of a better term, is all, it's Jack Lee and Willie and Angus and Fred Morrison maybe, and those guys are great players. But I guess what I'm saying is it sort of like tricks you into thinking that it's only about impressing a judge. But that's not really what it is.
No, I wholeheartedly agree there. Like, it's got to be more than that. Like, ultimately, right. I heard a story a month ago that I actually found really upsetting. Right, it really got me fuming about a certain judge saying to a certain competitor who happened to play in a certain band that has been very successful in the post-pandemic era, you need to be concentrating on your piping, son, because you don't want to be remembered as just some guy that played in some pipe band. You want to be remembered for winning the medals. And my reaction was to go, I want to be remembered fondly.
Yeah.
There are other options, huh?
Yeah, it'd be great to win the medals, but like Andrew said, it's not in my control. All I can do is play the tunes to the best of my ability. Some days that ability is 100%, some days not so much. But you're trying to make sure that there's more good days than bad days. You're trying to work on being a musician, being a performer. And I think again, I agree. If you are activated that way, then you've probably got to play well more often than not, and that leads to the competitive success that you are looking for.
Yeah.
But just that attitude, and I think it's a very oldie worldy attitude from quite an oldie worldy guy, that nothing matters unless you've got the medals. Like, your opinion doesn't matter, your education in the art form doesn't matter, your experience doesn't matter unless you've got the prizes to back it up. And you go, well, do you know what? There's plenty of bent judges out there. There's plenty of one-off players that played against a field that had a bad day, right? And in fact, there are guys out there who've won both silver and gold medals who have said to me and say quite openly, folk, I got lucky. I just got lucky that day. Never, the guys that should have won it actually, they had a mistake. The pipes didn't hold. The sun came out halfway through their tune. Whatever. Now, I don't mean that to lessen anybody's achievement. I really don't. But what I'm saying is, you can't control that. You can only play the tunes. And for somebody, the thing that incensed me about that story, which by the way was told to me second hand, so it could be a lot of old nonsense, but the idea of it, I thought, what are we doing this for? Like, I like to think I'm making the world a slightly better place by helping people to express themselves, enjoy themselves, and maybe learn a little bit about themselves as well. The things that nobody else can teach you, your bagpipe can teach you quite starkly, frankly. And I like to think of myself as a signpost that way. I'm just a guide, right? I am the scarecrow, Dorothy. Some people go this way, some people go that way, but that way is the Emerald City. I'm sure
that's some literary. That just flowed right off the tongue there, Dan. That was
good. It's almost like I use that line several times a week.
Yeah. It sounds remarkably like the message of finding bagpipe freedom, though, doesn't it? That that this is a tool for artistic expression, right? Like there's something like sort of on a human level that you want to be able to get it out, and this is a tool that you can use to get that out, and that it really goes beyond meddling,
Yeah, it's nice, right? But look, Andrew, how many times you won the Worlds now?
Twice.
All right.
My life changed the moment I won the Worlds. My life totally changed, Dan.
I can see that. I had a similar sort of experience.
No, I'm lying.
And that's how I know that I will never be happy until I win Worlds.
It's important. It's important for everyone to know that happiness does lie on the other side of success.
Well, this is what I'd say to you about it, right? Is winning the Worlds lasted about an hour.
Right, exactly.
So you get your photo taken, you hold the trophy, you maybe have a wee greet, you phone up your parents, they don't believe you, you hang up on them, that sort of thing, right? And then about 45 minutes to an hour later, you're like, oh, hold my pipes, I need to go for a pee.
Right.
And then real life, straight back in, right? The realities of being a human being come back in. And you know what I was? So let's say it's 7:05 p.m. on the 15th of August 2015. I was 5'9", grossly overweight, and very unhappy with myself. See, at 10:10 that night, I was 5'9", grossly overweight, very unhappy with myself, and quite drunk. Right? That's what. Now, the upswings were, professionally, did it open some doors? Aye, it did. Okay, I'm sure it helped swing me get the job here. Working at the Piping Centre, I met the woman that would become my wife. I had an opportunity to develop skills. All that sort of stuff. But it didn't make me a better person. I've got to make me a better person. You've got to make you a better person. And hopefully, using your bagpipe in a let's call it an important and positive way, whatever the music you play, whether it's light music, pure more, if you only play 5 tunes for the rest of your life, but if you try your best to play them well, make your life better. Put you in a community of people that makes you happy to be around them. And there's plenty of guys I've met who've won hee-haw, and they have a great time. They actually have a lot more fun playing pipes than I think I've ever had.
Yeah. I think that winning the Worlds is it's definitely symbolically very cool. But it's not about winning the world so much. It's just sort of like the cherry
crushing your enemies, yeah.
And it's the cherry on top of like a really, really long process of really trying to develop yourself to become, like you said, to become better or or to master something, or to create something really, really cool. And, that's the big idea. And so winning a gold medal sounds great, but it's like winning the gold medal isn't about the status that you get from winning it. It's just sort of like, symbolic of actually achieving those goals that you set out for yourself from the beginning, and, working to refine those tunes and seeing just how good you could get it.
Wait, Dan, what's the word for the crown? What do you call the crown in Pibroch?
Cronlua.
Yeah, the Cronlua.
The Cronlua?
Yeah, you don't pronounce it.
Cronlua. Could we say that symbolically, all of piping that you experience, you can have the ground and the twisty bit and the doubling bit and the lemwith bit, all the other bits, and when you get to the Kremlua, you said there are different kinds of Kremluas, right? One of them is maybe winning at the Worlds or getting gold medals, but maybe there are other kinds of Kremluas, and really there are Kremluas accessible to all pipers, right? Am I bringing something together that's beautiful here? Is this exciting?
It's very sweaty, Jim, but I think you're getting somewhere here. I think that's a pretty...
All right, you guys keep talking. I'm going to go get some more coffee here.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty artful way of putting it, really. Yeah, I mean, what it makes me think of is, remember The Wedding Singer with Adam Sandler?
Yeah.
Classic.
And there's a wee old granny that raps at her grandson's wedding.
Right.
That's a success, isn't it? That's incredible. Here comes your old granny hip-hopping her way through, what was it? I can't remember what it was, right? But some 1980s sort of rap. But yeah, I think as a musician you have to go that way. Like, God, the hours that I've spent practicing to get nowhere, like practicing the wrong things. And I think there's a lot of experience. Like I said before, this instrument will teach you a lot about yourself, who you are, who you want to be. To quote from one of the great films of the modern era, John Wick 4, the way you do anything...
Oh, don't spoil it. I haven't seen it yet. I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of John Wick.
If you like people walking through rooms hurting other people, this is the movie for you. I think it's cool. It's really cool. John Wick... still like the cinema over here.
The John Wick films are a lot like masterfully played Pibroch.
Oh, now who's trying to tie it all together?
Well, just like, I mean, work with me here. I mean, like, the film is like, the film is beautifully, ridiculously violent, and like the way that they do violence in the movie is so artistic and so cool, and it's so seamless, and the sound design and the film, like the quality of the shots. And like even the quality of the plot, it's very, very simple, but it's done so well. It's like the finest gratuitously violent film you could watch, and it's so interesting, right? It does actually remind me of Pibroch, where like it's not complicated, but by not being complicated, you can experience like really, really interesting types of nuance that you hadn't considered before. Minimalist. Maybe.
Yeah, so
that was just a thought experiment. I thought it came out all right.
That was a lot of work. It was a lot of work to get to the end of that analogy, I'll be perfectly honest with you. But I see where you're going with it. And yeah, there you go, right?
Well,
so I feel like we're trying to get an ending here. We're desperately trying to get an ending.
There are no endings to these shows.
Right.
Jim usually has to like, do some sort of bizarre green screen montage or something to get these to come to a finish.
Well, I'm trying to think if there's anything more useful that I can say about Pibroch performance that I haven't already said.
Well, Dan, I did want to give the normal Piper plug for Pibroch is for Everyone, having just recently finished it myself. And I just wanted to, I'd assume you've probably heard similar feedback already, but for me personally, like themes that we've talked about today, like up until now, for years I've been aware of Pibroch, but I've always felt like, maybe even unable to quite articulate this, but I've always felt like there was a certain level of sacredness around Pibroch, and unless I did it exactly right, I couldn't do it at all. And that was daunting, somewhat overwhelming even,
You're absolutely right.
Just like the title suggests, coming away from your book, it makes me feel a bit more like, no, Pibroch is for everyone, right? Like, I can dive into that, and like, even if, where before I felt like if I'm not doing it perfectly, I can't do it at all. Well, now I feel like, you know what? There are a couple that I want to learn, and I might never show anybody, but I'm going to learn them for the sake of me hearing what my instrument sounds like with with those chanter notes bouncing off those drone notes, because like, now, I don't know, there's a certain level of freedom that I now feel to give it a try.
Imagine if the opposite, like, I just like, I agree with that so much, and I sometimes like to play games. Like, imagine just like flipping it all around and take something like, we would call it soccer, but you would call it football elsewhere in the world. Imagine if you said, like, soccer is only for a select few who get it. Like, imagine how ridiculous that would sound. Or like, or reading is just for rich people. Maybe that used to be the case, but it's sort of been proven it's not the case anymore. And I think Pibroch is just another one of those things where we have this misguided idea of what it really is. But I think Pibroch absolutely is for everyone. I like to think that if you wandered around, the Gaelic regions of Scotland, like, before Culloden, you'd probably find a lot of people just wandering around kind of humming a piece of a Pibroch or something, or maybe experimenting with some possible variations that could come off of a, commonly understood melody or something. Dan, am I way off or what?
No, I think you're right. I think that, well, okay, right. Have you got your tinfoil hat handy?
Always.
The early 20th century, the end of the Victorian sort of era, dead cool to be Scottish, right? It was unlike Train Spotting. It was cool to be Scottish. Very pop culture heavy episode.
How dare you?
So, it was very cool to be it. Lots of very wealthy, educated in English suddenly finding themselves Scottish landed gentry kind of types, wanting to really get into being Scottish, right up for being Scottish, right? So they would do things like start a Highland Games, end of the Industrial Revolution, end of the first wave of the Industrial Revolution in 1840, you start seeing weekends become a thing, depending on where you are in the world. Some cultures couldn't afford to have a day off, but they would have days where they did less, things like that. Bear that in mind, by the way. See all this, the Sabbath stuff? That was like, you go to church on a Sunday morning and then you go back to work, right? Like, 7 days on, no breaks. Anyway, but like, they started to hold like fairs and fetes and Highland Games and all that sort of stuff based off of Gaelic or Gallic traditions. Or the word that absolutely grinds my gears is Celtic. The word Celtic was made up.
You mean Celtic?
Yeah, you mean Celtic,
I mean
right?
Celtic. Nobody else that works here means Celtic.
See, Celtic is a whole different thing in Glasgow, right? Yeah, you definitely... never mind.
Wonderful. I recently went to view houses. I'm trying to buy a house. I'm this off of buying one. And then we went to see one in Parkhead, which is where the Celtic Stadium is. And literally you could see the Jockstein stand from the front door of this. And I nudged my wife and went, that's a sign from God. That is, right? Said to the boy, you'll be hearing from it. We never heard from him. It's a beautiful house, though. It was a budgetary issue. It wasn't that my wife's family are all kind of Mad Rangers fans. But there you are. Anyway, so that word Celtic was kind of coined by the Cambridge Dictionary by like guys like J.R.R. Tolkien. Like, they weren't Scottish at all. They no business in anywhere else but England. But they were there going, I see that area over there on the map. Aye, that bit there. Only all the wee hairy people. They're the Celtic regions. Aye. And then some other xenophobe looked at like northwestern France and Spain and went, oh, wee hairy people over there as well. We'll call them Celtic too, eh? But these cultures that are thousands of years old were like, hang on a minute, we're the Gael. We get our own thing here, right? We don't classify us as anything else. Yeah. And that community music, right? If you go to Dunvegan Castle and say to the curator, here mate, where are the McCrimmon pipes? Where are the fairy pipes? they'll show you a set of pipes that parts of those pipes are over 200 years old, parts of those pipes are over 600 years old. Because who was making pipes? There was like a set, right? So there'd be very, very
Everybody's sharing their community set.
and you'd be singing the tunes. So Andrew's absolutely right. I think that the music would be much more popular because there wasn't anything else, right? So see, we go Piobaireachd, the Ceol Mór, the tunes of our fathers. No, right? It was just pipe music, Piobaireachd, pipe music, right? So you would sing it the same way you'd sing it. Though if you were down the tavern quaffing ale, right, you and Big Hector in there firing back the ale, talking about sheep farming or whatever, and some boys in the corner giving it the big jigs on the fiddle, saying, the 17th, 18th century, you'd walk out the door trying to whistle it, and maybe you'd take it back home and try it on your pipes. And by the same token, I think it's like Alan MacDonald, the great Alan MacDonald, what a phenomenal musician, somebody who I've tried to pick his brains, and I'll be honest, I get stuck about halfway in. Knows more about Piobaireachd, I think, than even the most sort of advanced Piobaireachologists, because he has a certain viewpoint, because he comes from a certain culture. And in his master's thesis, he basically reckons that your Campbells of Kilberry and your MacLeans of Pennycross and the original Piobaireachd Society destroyed what they anglicised Piobaireachd. They took it away from what it was. Now, do I agree with that in terms of performance? I don't know, right? And I'm not going to know. One way or another, it's not the music that I've been taught to play, it's not the music I compete with, and it's not the music that I teach. But I try to teach people that you can do other things with it. But if you're going to compete, then, well, there's a certain way you perform that music. But when you look at that early Piobaireachd Society and the work they did incredible work to collect and preserve. But they also changed a lot of stuff around, moved bits and pieces there. And that's why, the first volumes of the Piobaireachd Society... Sorry.
The Piobaireachd Society was like version 1 of ChatGPT, I think. They took all the settings and they channeled it all into one sort of like absolutely authoritative version, and in an artificially intelligent way. No, I'm just kidding. That was just a little joke. I'm sure they were very intelligent. But
I think that can kind of make sense, though. It makes me think of I've heard people relate any art form that has a history and has any sort of hierarchy of ivory tower people who say this is how it ought to be. There's this idea that if you go back far enough, any of these traditions, you might even say pipe music, Piobaireachd, right? It's like a volcano has erupted, and as long as the lava is flowing, it's a living tradition. It's a living art form that can shift and it's amorphous and it can change and stuff. But eventually that lava cools and becomes a solid rock. And then you have people who treat that like it must be exactly like this. And we even collectively forget that it was once flowing. It was once in movement, right? And if you chip away at the hardened parts on the outside, you might find a hot core inside that can still move around and is still living. Does that feel at all applicable, Dan?
I think so. I think that Piobaireachd is actually far more malleable culturally than we give it credit for.
Or maybe that's just in my own mind. It's not malleable, right?
But yeah, it was just what I was saying before. When I first got into Piobaireachd, when I was a child and got kind of frog marched into trying to play it, I was bloody awful at it. By the way, for me, it was that you're either doing it right, you're doing it wrong. There is no in between. There's no development. But see, so for the Piobaireachd Society, I did a talk at the end of 2021 about the tune The King's Taxes. For the kind of online talk seminar thing, Talk Piobaireachd, that's what it was called. And they're still available. You can find it on the Piobaireachd Society website. I'm about £15 slimmer at the time. Please look it up, I looked great. So
condolences.
In it I went through the Piobaireachd Society archive, the recorded archive, and I took performances of the King's Taxes from about 70 years worth of players. And what I did is I went from Bob Brown, right, one of the Bobs Balmoral, to one of his direct pupils, Andrew Keithley, right, a director of Army Bagpipe Music and gold medal winner, who's Andrew Keithley's writings, by the way, if you ever get your hands on them, incredible. The guy's insight into how to play the music was brilliant. And then Murray Henderson, who's a kind of adjunct of the Bobs of Balmoral, right? He went to Jimmy McIntosh, who went to the Bobs, right? So from Murray Henderson all the way down to Bob Brown, there's a line. And all three of they men play that tune totally differently. So now, when I say totally differently, they don't change the melody notes, and there is a format, but the nuance, the way they play it, and I would argue actually the way Murray plays it is probably the best, because I think it's the most obviously musical. Like, there's just the descriptions that I gave at one point is the floral nature of Murray's technical work enhanced every aspect of the tune, right? And he had, okay, it's a more recent recording, so his pipe was a bit better, right, than the other two. Like Bob Brown's recording, it's a BBC archive, so it would have been done on tape to tape. So was he told, you've got to play a 9-minute tune, but you've only got 7 minutes to do it, and that's why it sounds a bit frantic? Or you know, like Andrew Keathley's one, that was really real, done in his office at Edinburgh Castle. Like, is that... well, it wouldn't be
maybe the acoustics weren't the best in the world anyway, huh?
I mean, even the way he plays it, is he recorded it on a wet Tuesday for somebody that's going on the Pipe Majors course to go away and learn? Like, there's, I think performance context is a big thing. You know, we all want to do it the same way every single time, but like, who's to say that those first two recordings that weren't done in a competitive situation weren't a bit phoned in? We don't know. We just don't know.
It's a bit like Plato's Cave, isn't it? It's like, I think the availability of recordings and the availability of people to teach far and wide has really democratized how we think about P-Rock as well, and it's fascinating, isn't it? But whereas before, I think you would have to take someone's word for it. This is exactly how it is. So it's a lot easier to say, "Oh, I am the authority on this tune because I went to the Bobs and the Bobs went to, you know, John McDonald, and John McDonald was connected to John Mackay, or however it went, right?" And it's like, and now it's much more difficult to say, "I am the authority on this," and it's far easier to say, "Actually, the way I played is based on this," you know, and you can sort of actually listen to the, you can actually listen to the different ways this tune can be played really, really well. I think that's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing. And by the way, it's probably, and by the way, just talking about Murray's bagpipe, you know, I think that reinforces an earlier point that you made where, you know, you want that canvas to be, you know, as good as it can possibly be in order to make that great painting. So it's not for nothing. And I think an interesting place to venture toward concluding here might be that P-Rock playing and P-Rock culture is in great shape right now relative to where it has been.
Oh, absolutely. I think even just the kind of popularisation, the proliferation of it in our kind of pop media for piping. And nothing in piping happens immediately. It's all slow, right? But big music society, the amount of P-Rock getting played by pipe bands now on the regular, which is a whole separate conversation about adjudication that I don't want to get into until after this season's finished. But the fact that we've got a player base across the grades that is well educated enough where you can go, right lads, we're going to play the Groat, right? We're going to play a bit of the Groat in this medley. And everybody goes, all right, no bother, we can do that. I think that's testament to generations of really, really good tuition, but also testament to people who are willing to pick the ball up. People like you, Jim. Really, Jim, you're the hero in this story.
Hey.
Jim's going to play a P-Rock on the next episode of Dojo Conversations.
I'll have Castle Menzies ready to go.
Mingus. Castle Mingus.
Mingus.
Yeah.
I was aware of that, but I thought to myself, like, I don't want to look pretentious and pretend like the Z is a G. So.
We're playing P-Rock. Get the brown brogues on, get the Balmoral to the side.
Yeah.
As pretentious as you like. This is pretentious music. So I was listening to a thing this week about how words get anglicised, and Menzies is Mingus, but we used to have like a news agent in the UK called John Menzies. He never said, "I'm popping into John Mingus for a Lucozade and a pack of painkillers because I was out too late last night." He said, "Go to John Menzies." Yeah, there you go.
It's a lost cause. No one will ever pronounce controversy correctly again. It's always going to be
No,
Yeah.
never
controversy.
again. But again, see, you know what's funny there, right? We're talking about like how the tunes are played and why they're played that way. Oh, you know, a little turn here, a little turn there, and over time that becomes the thing. I had a great version of this explained to me, right? And it's one of the like urban myth things, right? But apparently, in the late 1970s, Yale University ran a study on behavioural cycles using chimpanzees. Have you heard this one?
Go on, maybe, but carry on.
We never
It's often called
stopped
the monkey
anyone. We never stopped anyone from talking about chimpanzees on this show.
No way, man.
Terrifying,
Hard and
mate.
fast rule.
You don't want to run into a chimpanzee, they'll have the face off you. Like that. Anyway, so they had this chimpanzee enclosure, and in the middle of it, bolted to the ground, was a step ladder leading up to the ceiling where there was a hatch in the ceiling. Okay? And what they would do is, a bunch of chimpanzees, little bikes, hats, all that sort of stuff, cutting about inside the enclosure, and at a certain time every day, the hatch would open and a bunch of bananas would be put down. They close the hatch, chimpanzees would run up the ladder, grab the bananas, chimpanzee fun time, right? They'll have a banana, do whatever they do, right? Make primitive tools out of things. Anyway, so they do this for a couple of months, and everything's cool, right? These chimps are having a great time. And then one day what happens is, it hits banana time. The hatch opens. A chimp runs up, and instead of getting bananas, he gets it right in the face with a fire hose, and goes flying off the thing. Monkey pandemonium. Okay, mental. So they spray down the whole group, close the thing up, and then the next day, the hatch opens. A monkey starts to climb the step ladders. Bang! There with the fire hose. They do that for a couple of weeks, right? And eventually,
That's
every time
awful.
they open the hatch, it's terrible.
Yeah, those poor chimps.
Right. Well, don't worry, they were imaginary, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, good thing, because I'm just thinking like Planet of the Apes starts, and those people with the fire hose are going to be the first ones to go. I'm sure.
So, but it's a comment on human nature. So what happens is, eventually the hatch opens and the chimps run away. They don't go anywhere near it. And that saves them getting hit with a fire hose. So, a wee while later, a new chimp from another group is brought into the fold, right? He comes in with like, I don't know, right, a fur jacket and like a big tray of cookies, and he's accepted by the rest of the chimps. And the hatch opens, and a bunch of bananas is put on top of the step ladder. So the new chimp goes for it, and the other chimps jump him and maul him. They attack the new chimp who's doing this thing, because in their minds, going up the step ladder only results in violence and failure and defeat. So it's easier to bring this one guy down than it is for everyone to ascend together. And that's the moral of the story, right? People are bloody awful, and they will stand on your throat to get in front of you. Or you can all just decide to climb the ladder yourselves, together, as one, to make the choice as a group, to say, we can do whatever we plan to do, whatever we want to do. This is just an art form. We're not talking about taking over the capital. We're talking about playing pipes for enjoyment, for goodness sake. But when it comes to the music, we can put these imaginary roadblocks in to say like, oh, well, so-and-so doesn't like it when I play that tune that way. And by the way, so-and-so might be the sort of so-and-so that likes folk to think that he's well educated enough to know the bloody difference. Chances are, if they're talking like that, they don't. And like, some folk are going to be listening to this going, he's fearless saying these things. What are you going to do? Right? Never give you a prize again. Not going to win any prizes anyways, doesn't really matter. Like, try to play the tunes well. It has to be its own reward. And even like that idea of, you know, going against the grain, going against the fashion. Well, I mean, by how much, right? Unless you're going to turn up the silver medal and have like sparklers coming out your drones, you're not going to be doing particularly much different from anybody else.
I want to write that down. That's a good idea.
Roller skates. That's the move.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I always think that wee, what would you call that? It's not an anecdote. The fable, that wee Aesop's fable about the chimps is like, yeah, you might find yourself in a situation where trends have changed and you holding on to what you know, what you believe to be the correct way of doing things, isn't positive. And what we have to do as human beings is make the choice to go, right, will we change because it's the right thing to do to change, or will we change because everybody else has said you should do that? And that, I mean, how many after-school specials have you watched about the same thing? So don't believe the hype is what I'm really saying. Do the research, listen to your tutor, put the yards in to play the music the best of your ability.
So, I mean, earlier in the episode, I accused the early Piobaireachd Society of being like version 1 of ChatGPT. I was just kidding, but it sounds like to wrap this up, you think that the current Piobaireachd Society is just a bunch of chimps, if I'm understanding correctly.
This is Andrew trying to go like, okay, maybe I said something inflammatory, but I'm going to make it so Dan said something even more inflammatory.
Yeah. I'm a member of the current Piobaireachd Society. Right? I speak at the lecture.
So you are you are one of the chimps.
That's right. I am the man. I am the man who are sticking it to. Like I pay my £20 a year like everybody else, right? I have a tie. Well, here's the thing, right? If you go to the Piobaireachd Society conference, it's not. I don't know what we say. It's not. It's a bunch of people who are really, really passionate about the music and really well informed. You will find if you go to speak at that conference, the dialogue back and forth between the audience and the speaker is excellent. These are not the people trying to hold anybody back. These are the people trying to inform and support. If you're talking about like tune choice for the medals or something like that, look, I have no insight on that, frankly, other than there's a statistical standard of tune, there's a set styles of tune that they are going to pick all the time because they meet a technical and musical standard that is deemed by the current music committee to be the standard required for the medals. And year on year that changes because the committee's not the same year on year.
Yeah.
And that's a whole thing in its own right. Like who gets to be on that committee? Because you're having it full of guys that have won the class, so maybe know the best group. Because a lot of pipers can be athletic, so they've learned the big tunes and play them impeccably well. But if you said to them, "What's the historical significance of the bicker?" they'd look at you and go, "I won my silver medal with it." So, and you go, "Well, so you need to have a mix."
Yeah, all joking aside, about all this stuff, and it is fun to joke about because people are very sensitive about it. But all joking aside, I mean, I think that it would be interesting to hear your take on this, Dan. But it's quite possible that without the original Piobaireachd Society, the art form may well have been lost. Maybe they were onto something, or certainly. Or it would have been somewhat lost. And then there's no question, and I said it once, but I'll reiterate it, because I just don't want this podcast to come off like I'm making off-colored jokes about the way things are going. I mean, I think that the existent Piobaireachd Society and all of the institutions surrounding it have led to, I think, a huge renaissance of Piobaireachd. I mean, it's easy to be negative at times, but it's very hard not to be extremely positive. At the dojo, we've got lots of people excited to learn their first tune next month, and that's just one example of how Piobaireachd has really sort of like started to thrive over the last decade or so. People have taken a real interest in it, and I think that I think Piobaireachd is going that way, not that way. It's going up and out. So I think that's kind of exciting, and it takes a village, or in this case, maybe a globe of people to keep it going. And there's always going to be negatives that you could fixate on, but I think it's probably more important to focus on the positive.
Agreed.
I think that's it. Did I do it? Did I win the end of the podcast?
I think you win.